The Three Fishing Brothers Gruff by Ben Galbraith. Before we dive into the story, I want to share why I picked this book. It actually reminds me of a funny story about myself and something that happened when I got a little too greedy. I remember when I was younger, I loved picking flowers from the garden. I picked so many because they were just so pretty. But I picked so many that I ended up with none left for anyone else to enjoy. The garden looked empty and I realized I took more than I needed, and it wasn't good for the plants or the garden. This book is about three brothers who also get greedy, except instead of flowers, they take too many fish from the bay. I want you to think about what might happen when you take too much from nature. Let's dive into the story and see what happens when the brothers get too greedy with the fish. In three dirty shacks in a town called Poverty Bay, there lived three mean, prickly-faced fishing brothers. The youngest brother, Gruff, was mean and greedy, and he owned the smallest boat, a dinghy named Whippersnapper. The middle brother, Gruff, was even meaner and greedier, and he owned a medium-sized trawler named Crawler. Even meaner and greedier was the eldest, Angora Gruff, and he owned a huge fishing vessel called the Codswallop. Every morning, the brothers would set out in their boats, returning at dusk with tons of fish. But one day they came back with only a small catch, and the next day they came home with nothing. "It's your fault, sea slug," snarled Anvil to Angora. "You take far more than you need."
"No, it's Anglo's fault," hissed Angora. "He takes the little fish before they've grown."
"What about you, fish breath?" snarled Anglo to Anvil. "The crawler leaks oil. You probably poisoned the fish."
"Well, Poverty Bay might be empty," said Angora, "but there are plenty more fish in the sea."
At dawn the next morning, the three brothers Gruff decided to try the Bay of Plenty. But between Poverty Bay and the Bay of Plenty lived Mink Whale, the guardian of the ocean. She was the one thing the brothers Gruff were afraid of. Anglo, the youngest, went first. Putter, 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 went his boat towards the Bay of Plenty. "Who's that entering my bay?" called Mink Whale. "Stop right there, or I'll swallow you whole."
"But please don't," stuttered Anglo. "I only have a small dinghy and I am no threat to the sea. Wait for my brother, Anvil Gruff. He'll catch twice as many fish as me."
"Very well," said Mink Whale. "Take only as much as you can eat. I'll wait for your older brother." After Anglo and after Anvil, the oldest brother Angora came, and with a huge thud, Angora Gruff drove directly over the top of Mink Whale. Even Mink's thick, blubbery skin couldn't cushion the fierce blow from the Codswallop. She was hurt and had to rest. Now there was no one to protect the Bay of Plenty. So they fished and fished until there was no fish to be fished. The story continues, but now we will look into the key textual concepts.
There lived three greedy brothers. They fished and fished until Poverty Bay was empty, so they decided to find the Bay of Plenty to catch more fish. But Mink Whale, the guardian of the ocean, wasn't happy, and the eldest brother herded to catch all the fish.
The story is told from a third-person perspective, meaning that the narrator describes the actions of the brothers and the bay. The reader learns about the characters through their actions, dialogue, and expressions. The story begins with an introduction, leads to the brothers' increasing greed, reaches a climax when the bay becomes empty, and ends with the consequences they face. The themes in this book are about greed and taking care of nature. The brothers represent greed. They always want more fish, even though they don't need it all. The bay represents nature, and we see how it gets harmed when the brothers take too much. The book teaches us why it's important to only take what we need and care for our environment. As a third person, the author's voice is moralistic and aims to teach an important lesson about the dangers of greed. The tone becomes more serious as the bay's condition worsens, showing the consequences of not respecting nature. The author positions the reader to feel sympathy for the bay and the sea creatures. By showing how the bay changes from full of life to empty and lifeless, the reader is encouraged to see the importance of taking care of the environment. The illustrations do a great job of showing the brothers' expressions and body language. Their facial expressions match their growing greed. They often have determined or even cruel looks. This helps reinforce their selfish and destructive nature. When they're out fishing, the illustrations show dark, rainy, and gloomy weather. The rough sea and stormy conditions match their greed and show how their actions are destructive to nature. The dark colors and heavy rain visually represent the negative energy they bring with their greed. After overfishing, when the brothers fish all the fish out of the bay, the illustrations emphasize the sense of emptiness and loss. The fish are drawn to show their lifelessness. They look dull and there's no life in their eyes, which makes it clear that the bay is now empty of healthy marine life. The once lively bay becomes visually barren. There are no seabirds or fish seen in the water anymore, emphasizing that the bay has been completely exploded and destroyed by the brother sections. Now let's talk about one of the brothers, the eldest brother Gruff. He's the one who hurts the mink whale to get more fish. This image, Angora Gruff's expression is stern with a furrowed brow and tightly pressed lips. His eyes look sharp and calculating, which gives the impression that he is constantly thinking about how to get more for himself. He's presented in a golden frame, suggesting a sense of self-importance and pride. These elaborate frames also symbolize wealth, which aligns with his greedy nature. The accompanying text describe him as even meaner and greedier, emphasizing his character. The story happens in the Bay of Plenty, which symbolizes a place full of natural resources and abundance. The name itself suggests that this is a rich ecosystem with a lot of marine life, making it an attractive location for the brothers to exploit. The scene is portrayed from the perspective inside the boat, emphasizing the power of Angora Gruff over the marine environment. The viewer sees from Angora's point of view as he looks at mink whale, giving a sense of dominance and control. On the other hand, the whale's distressed eye shows vulnerability and fear. The contrast between the interior of the boat and the sea outside highlights the divide between humanity's destructive actions and the natural environment. The interior is quite industrial looking, reflecting the commercial, exploitative nature of their fishing. The weather is stormy with rain and rough waters. This visual setting reflects the chaos and destructiveness Angora is doing. The stormy sea represents the destruction caused by overfishing. Overall, these elements create a powerful image of environmental exploitation. The stormy, darkened imagery, the dominating figure of Angora Gruff, and the distressed whale all contribute to the book's central theme, the dangers of human greed and its destructive effect on nature. This page visually reinforces the message of how unsustainable actions can lead to the suffering of wildlife and ultimately harm the balance of nature. The stark contrast between the industrial boat interior and the natural sea environment highlights the destructive impact of overfishing on the ecosystem. I love the phrase, "there were no fish to be fished," because it has a nice rhyme and it shows how the same word, fish, can be used as both a noun and a verb. It's simple but powerful, and it helps us understand just how much was taken from the sea. In this book, there are a lot of descriptive language describing the brothers. With students, we can write down some synonyms that we can think of. For the creative writing, we can think about what if the brothers listened to the sea creature, mink whale. The activity would be students write an alternative ending where the brothers stop being greedy and think about how could the story end differently if they made better choices. For their oral work, they can act out parts of the story. Students can be one of the brothers or the mink whale and see how well they can express the characters' feelings. Students should use the descriptive language, showing how well they comprehend that part of the story. For the differentiation, supporting students might use sentence starters like, if the brothers listened, they would blah blah blah, to help students write their endings. With extending students, they research an example of overfishing in real life and compare it to the story, and create a poster of what they find. The two related texts that I could use alongside the three fishing brothers Gruff would be, first, If Sharks Disappeared by Lily Williams. This nonfiction book shows what happens if sharks vanish from the ocean, connecting well with the environmental impact shown in the Three Fishing Brothers Gruff. It helps students understand cause and effect, which is key to our environmental theme. Second, The Lorax by Dr. Seuss. It's about the dangers of greed and environmental destruction, much like the story of the Gruff brothers. The playful rhymes make it engaging for students while reinforcing the message of protecting nature. This book can be used in a cross-curricular activity involving science. We could focus on understanding food chains and the importance of not overfishing. We could discuss how every animal in the ocean is connected and how taking too much can lead to problems for the whole environment. This ties in well with the living world part of the science syllabus, where students learn about how living things depend on each other and the impact humans can have on ecosystems.